A man who's known for being surrounded by wealth, power, and influence walks down a bustling city street. His name? Barron Trump. But on this particular day, he's not just walking. He's on a mission that will forever change the life of a man who never expected it. This isn't a typical act of charity. It's not your run-of-the-mill donation. This is a life-altering moment. In a world full of cynicism, where generosity seems to come with strings attached, Barron Trump proves that kindness doesn't need to be explained. It doesn't need a reason, and when you watch what happens next, trust me, you'll never look at generosity the same way again. It was a crisp afternoon when Barron Trump stepped out of the lavish Trump Tower in New York City. He was dressed casually, blending in like any regular person walking the busy streets of Manhattan. But today wasn't just any day. Today, Barron was about to do something unexpected, something that no one saw coming. A man was sitting at the corner of the street, clutching a worn-out cardboard sign that read, "Hungry, please help." His clothes were ragged, his face weathered by time and hardship. He looked like so many others who had been dealt a tough hand by life, but there was something different about him, something that caught Barron's attention from the moment he stepped out onto the sidewalk. As Barron approached the man, his heart began to race, not because of any anxiety or fear, but because he knew that this moment, this simple act, was going to change everything for this man. Barron stopped right in front of the man, looking him straight in the eyes. For a second, the man didn't recognize who Barron was. After all, who would expect someone like Barron Trump, the son of a billionaire, to stop and talk to someone like him? "Hey there," Barron said, his voice calm but with a sense of urgency. "I see you're going through a tough time, but today's going to be different." The homeless man looked up in surprise, trying to place the young man who had just spoken to him. Barron smiled warmly, and for the first time in a long while, the homeless man felt seen. Really seen. "I'm Barron," he continued, "and I've been thinking about how I can help people like you. I want to make a difference, not just by donating to organizations, but by reaching out personally." The man's face remained stoic, unsure of what to think. Was this some kind of prank? Was Barron just another wealthy person who would pass by without a second glance? But Barron wasn't done. Before the man could say anything, Barron reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. The man's eyes widened, not knowing what was inside, but his instinct told him that it wasn't just a typical donation. Barron handed him the envelope with a smile and said, "This is for you." The homeless man hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should even open it. He had received plenty of charity in the past, but nothing like this. When he finally opened the envelope, his eyes went wide in disbelief. Inside, there was a check for $10,000. For a moment, the world around them seemed to stop. The man just stood there, staring at the check in his hands, as if the reality of it hadn't quite sunk in. He blinked rapidly, not sure if he was dreaming. $10,000. This wasn't just a couple of dollars to get him through the day. This was a lifeline, a chance to rebuild. "Why?" the man stammered, his voice breaking as the tears began to well up in his eyes. "Why would you do this for me?" Barron smiled softly, his voice gentle but firm. "Because you matter, and because everyone deserves a second chance. You're not invisible, and you don't have to go through this alone." The man's hands shook as he tried to comprehend the gesture. This kind of kindness could change his life, change everything. By now, a small crowd had gathered. People were stopping to watch, some filming the scene, others just in awe of what was happening. The homeless man, overcome with emotion, clutched the check to his chest like it was the most precious thing he had ever held. He looked at Barron with gratitude, but also disbelief. "Thank you. Thank you so much," the man said, his voice cracking. I don't even know how to thank you for this." Barron placed a hand on the man's shoulder and said, "No need to thank me. Just pay it forward when you can. Help someone else when you're able to. That's all I ask." As Barron turned to leave, the crowd watched in stunned silence. The homeless man stood there, his eyes fixed on the check in his hands, as if he couldn't believe what had just happened. For the first time in a long while, he felt hope. Real, tangible hope. As Barron walked away, the weight of what had just happened settled into the crowd. People began to murmur among themselves, still processing the raw emotion they had just witnessed. Some were trying to figure out if it was a staged event for publicity. But for those who truly understood, this wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about a moment of genuine humanity. A small group of bystanders gathered around the homeless man, offering their support, congratulating him for his good fortune. But the man's mind was elsewhere, still stuck in the moment of disbelief. He couldn't stop looking at the check. $10,000. More money than he'd seen in years. It wasn't just a lifeline, it was the key to unlocking a future he never thought he'd have. As Barron made his way back into the bustling streets of Manhattan, he didn't look for praise. He didn't need it. He had done what felt right, what came from the heart. This wasn't a stunt for attention, it was a chance to prove that generosity doesn't have to be grandiose. It can be simple, real, and life-changing. Days passed, and the man, whose name was Mark, started to process the incredible gift he had received. Mark had lived on the streets for over a decade, struggling with addiction, loss, and homelessness. He had almost given up on ever turning his life around. But Barron's gesture had shaken him to his core. It had awakened something inside him, a determination to make a change, not just for himself, but for others who were still suffering like he once had. Mark knew he had to make the most of this opportunity. He immediately began reaching out to organizations that could help him get back on his feet. With the $10,000, he secured temporary housing, enrolled in rehab, and started looking for work. The money wasn't a quick fix. It was a foundation upon which he could build a new life. He also made it a point to give back in his own way. As he regained his strength and stability, he started helping other homeless individuals in the area, offering food, clothes, or just a friendly word of encouragement. He knew that generosity wasn't something that could be measured in money. It was about making someone feel human again. But not everyone was as moved by Barron's act of kindness. As the story of Barron's $10,000 donation spread through the media, critics came out in full force. Many questioned Barron's motives. Was it really an act of charity or just a PR stunt designed to polish the Trump family's image? Some argued that if Barron truly cared, he should be donating on a larger scale, not handing out money on the streets. But Barron ignored the noise. The truth was that he didn't do it for approval. He did it because it was the right thing to do. In a world where so many people were quick to judge, Barron's focus remained on the one man who had been directly impacted by his kindness: Mark. A few months later, Mark's transformation was nothing short of remarkable. He had found a steady job at a local restaurant, and he had rebuilt his life from the ground up. He had a small apartment now, and he spent his weekends volunteering at shelters, helping those still living in the same conditions he had endured not long ago. One afternoon, Mark was sitting in his new apartment, flipping through a photo album he had started to document his journey. He came across a photo of Barron and himself, taken just after the surprise $10,000 moment. It was a simple picture, but it captured the essence of everything that had happened. A young man giving a gift, not for fame, but out of a sincere desire to help. And a man who had been given a second chance, now using it to rebuild his life. Mark paused, looking at the photo with a deep sense of gratitude. He took a deep breath and said, "I owe you everything, Barron. You saved me." Barron's one act of kindness rippled through the lives of so many people. It didn't stop with Mark. The news of the surprise $10,000 spread far and wide, inspiring others to give selflessly. Stories began to emerge of people in the community stepping up to help their neighbors, offering a meal, a place to stay, or just a listening ear. In a world that often feels divided, Barron's simple, heartfelt gesture reminded us all that kindness is a universal language. It has the power to change lives in ways that wealth and power never could. And while the critics continued to debate Barron's intentions, those who had witnessed the moment firsthand knew one thing for certain. It was a moment of pure, unfiltered kindness. One day, a local news station interviewed Mark about his incredible transformation. He spoke passionately about how Barron's gift had changed his life, but he also spoke about something deeper: the responsibility that came with receiving such generosity. "Look, I didn't just get handed a check and all of a sudden everything was better," Mark said in the interview, "but that $10,000, that was the start. It gave me the opportunity to rebuild. But what really changed me wasn't the money. It was the belief that someone out there saw me. that someone cared. Mark's story quickly became a viral inspiration, with people from all over the world sending messages of encouragement and support. And just like Barron had hoped, Mark took his story and used it to lift up others, paying it forward in every way he could. As the months rolled on, Barron's life continued its fast-paced, high-profile trajectory. But he never forgot what happened that day on the streets of New York City. Every time he looked back, he thought about the moment when Mark's face lit up with surprise and disbelief. It was a reminder that kindness, no matter how small, always makes a difference. And sometimes it can change the world. Barron may never know the full extent of how that $10,000 affected Mark's life or how many others were inspired to be more compassionate. But that's the beauty of real generosity. It doesn't need recognition. It doesn't need accolades. It just needs a heart that's willing to give without expecting anything in return. And as for Mark, his journey was just beginning. He knew that his past didn't define him. The man he was becoming, however, was someone who could change the world, just like Barron Trump had done for him.